the best of the week on Relevant Radio.
How about Dana now in Orange County? Good morning, Dana.
Good morning, Patrick. I'm an atheist. I do enjoy listening to your show. My ultimate question for you is, without God, could human beings come up with any moral values, or could they create their own moral values? As an atheist, I feel that there is no God, and therefore all moral values come from human beings. And it's kind of my belief system that, the moral value for God's existence, that argument is actually a God of the gaps argument, because there's this gap between, human moral values and the moral values of a divine, perfect God. And we're uncomfortable with that gap, and so we kind of make up gods to fill that gap. But back to my question, could human beings formulate moral values without God?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Okay. Would that be a possible, though, the God of the gaps argument, that the moral argument is actually a God of the gaps argument? Now, I realize that you completely disagree with this, but is it, plausible at least that people are making up gods to fill up this uncomfortable space between, the perfect moral values of a perfect God and the human moral values that we can come up with on our own?
Yeah, well, I'm very familiar with the God of the gaps theory. Usually, Dana, it pertains to scientific inquiry and scientific discoveries. It's not used typically in an ethical context or a moral context, but we can talk about it in that context as well. So, for those who aren't familiar with that term, God of the gaps is kind of a derisive way of saying that you theists out there, you believe in a God based on things like what you claim to be miracles. And all those really are just things that science hasn't caught up with yet to be able to give a natural explanation for. And so the God of the gaps basically is saying that theory is that you're, as a theist, your God is shrinking and shrinking and shrinking and shrinking because he's limited now to whatever those gaps haven't yet filled in with a naturalist explanation. Simply put, that's what the approach is. So if we wanted to take this theory and apply it to morality, to answer the first part of your question, I would say absolutely. I mean, there are plenty of atheists who are good moral people in a natural sense. They don't cheat on their taxes. They don't cheat on their wives. They're philanthropic. They are honest. I've known atheists who are that way too. So it's not really an issue of could these moral or ethical guidelines be arrived at by human beings. They certainly can if they don't believe in God. But my question really is a little bit different, and that is, well, what would the point be? Why be moral? Why bother?
I would say that it does matter. It doesn't matter in a divine way. It doesn't matter, for all of eternity. But getting along and the human experience and all of the joy and heartache that we have in that experience still matters, even if there's no God. It's more of a short-term matter than a long-term matters, but it's still very important, the human experience without God. So, I don't feel personally that this is convincing to me anyway that there is a God, just because, it wouldn't be an eternal mattering or something that comes from God, a divine God, if that makes sense.
Oh, it does, yeah. I actually hadn't really been able to make my pitch yet. So I understand with the pitch not made yet, you don't agree with it. And that's okay, that's fair. But I'll just try to flesh that out a little bit. So my question earlier, sure, atheists can be moral, and it's always puzzled me why many atheists, and perhaps not you, Dana, but many atheists seem to labor under this misconception that Christian theists, I being one of them, have this idea that you can't be good without God. That's ridiculous. You can be good. And many people are indeed good if we're looking at the word good in a natural way, honesty, integrity, etc. So it's not even on my radar screen as a Christian theist to say that an atheist can't be good, can't have moral values and good moral values without God. It's not the issue, it seems to me. Rather, the issue is, why should you be good? Now, you actually, just now, Dana, you posited what is standard in a discussion like this, and that is because it gives meaning, it helps other people, if you're altruistic, if you want to see moral acts as something that builds up the community and you have a happier life, less friction. It's an all-around better way to go. Would that be a fair assessment of what you're saying? That it's, it doesn't have to be eternal because things are easier and more pleasant when people act in a moral way in this life. Would that be a fair way of explaining it?
Yeah, and sometimes, though, it's not more pleasant. It's painful or creates anxiety. So we have all of the emotions in the human experience. I just don't see that it's necessary to have a God to fulfill that experience. It would be nice to have a God. I think, yes, if I was a Catholic and I believed the Catholic faith was true, I would say that, yes, that would be an improvement to the human experience, because then I could look forward to an afterlife, which as an atheist, I don't look forward to. I hope for it, actually. I'm hopeful there's some kind of afterlife, but I don't really believe that there actually is. So I would say that, that maybe I would have more hope if I was a believing Catholic, but I'm pragmatic. Yeah. I just don't believe what I don't believe. So
I understand. And I guess I would be in the same way, but a kind of a mirror opposite. I can't bring myself to not believe, because the evidence for me is so overwhelming that God does exist. But let's stay on the topic that you chose here, on ethics and morality. So here's the next part of my point, and that is that if, as Alfred Lord Tennyson once said in his famous poem, that nature is red in tooth and claw, and if indeed there is nothing beyond nature, there's nothing supernatural, no God or gods, no ghosts, no demons, no angels, there's no heaven or hell. When you die, you don't go anywhere because you don't have an eternal soul. There is nowhere to go. It's just the natural world, the natural order. So think about this for a minute. If that's true, and that is the fundamental underpinning of the atheistic worldview, that nothing exists that's not material in some way, and even the ideas in your own mind, really, if you take your point to its logical conclusion, Dana, you would have to then say that what you think of as, like your memories, or if you love your wife or your kids, or the love that you experience from people who love you, your own sense of your own personal worth, things that strike you as good or evil, or even truth itself, for that matter, can't really be real in an abstract or immaterial sense. Because if the atheistic worldview is true, there is nothing that is immaterial. It's all natural. And if that's the case, then those electrically charged chemical reactions that are fizzing away in your brain matter are telling you in a predetermined way that, well, those things don't exist. And the electrically charged chemical reactions in my brain matter are telling me something different. But why does it matter? I mean, whether we agree or disagree, why would it matter? Because this is a meaningless universe. And to get to your point, you make of it what you want. I would propose to you that it's radically subjective. And I am certain that in your heart of hearts, you recognize that certain things are true or false, or certain things are in themselves good, like honesty, or the pursuit of truth, or not killing people, like that would be an evil. I'm sure you and I could agree right on down the list of things that we would regard to be inherently good or inherently evil, but that would be impossible if the atheistic worldview is true. All that could possibly be would be things that you'd like and don't like. You don't like it when people are dishonest. You like it when people are honest. You don't like it when people murder other people. You do like it when people show mercy, etc. Even though I agree with you, it's purely subjective. It's just you saying this is what I like and this is what I don't like. And collectively, we can do the same thing as a community, as a country, as a planet. We could say collectively, these are things we like or don't like, but that doesn't give them any intrinsic value beyond the individual. I like this or I don't like this. What I would argue is that you and I really do agree that some things are in themselves good and some things are in themselves evil. But how can that be? Because if nature is all there is, what the baby gazelle thinks of as good, as in, hey, great, I get to stay alive, And then, the crocodile wants lunch and he lunges up out of the water and chomps down on the baby gazelle. That's not good for the baby gazelle, but it's good for the crocodile because he has his lunch now. The baby gazelle doesn't like it. The baby gazelle's mother doesn't like it, but who cares? The crocodile does it because he can. That would be the essence of an atheistic universe, where there really is nothing that's truly right or wrong. It's just how it makes you feel. And I think my proposal, Dana, would be if you ponder that long enough, it will help you maybe begin to consider that perhaps there is something above nature, and those immaterial realities like love and truth, they are immaterial. We know they're immaterial. You can't go get a box of truth at Lowe's, or you can't mine it out of the ground. It's not a physical thing, but it does really exist, and we live our lives on the basis of knowing that they exist. That right there, I would say, is an opening to the possibility that maybe there's more to this than what the atheistic worldview says there is. I'll pause. I'm sure you have stuff you want to say.
This is a point that I agree with you on, and it's a point that I think the atheist community really struggles with, in that if there is no God, then ultimately it kind of does boil down to human opinions as to what is moral and immoral. You did kind of mention that, it can be a comprehensive human opinions, including a large number of people believing something is moral and immoral. So you mentioned that is something that I agree with. It's not really an individual person's opinion.
My point is that ultimately, it all collapses in on itself as purely subjective. It's just, what do you think is right and wrong? And that may or may not differ from me. And culturally or experience-wise, we may have agreement on many issues. But even beyond that, what's the point? I mean, if it's true, if Darwin's theory of evolution is true, or some variant of that, and everything is purely natural, and we're just the leading edge of evolution, and who knows where things will go tomorrow. If I am faster and smarter, if I am the fitter of the species, and I can outwit or outthink or outmuscle whatever my competition is and get away with it, why shouldn't I? I mean, there's no punishment in the afterlife. If I can get away from being punished in this life, because I wouldn't like that, if I can get away with it, what's the moral imperative for me not to do that? Especially if we're all just, natural objects like crocodiles and baby gazelles. That's where I'm coming from. It doesn't seem to me that there's any reason why I shouldn't drain your bank account if I could hack into it and get away with it. You know what I mean? There's no moral reason why I shouldn't do that.
I'm saying that there is no moral reason for you. There's no divine moral reason for you not to do that, but there's a practical reason. You'll go to prison if you do that.
No, but what if I can do it without getting caught?
There's always the risk of getting caught. No, this is what atheists struggle with. There would not be a punishment in the afterlife for you to do that. That's what makes us feel uncomfortable, and that's what motivates us. This is the motivation to make up that a God exists. It's not evidence that a God actually exists. Well, I understand.
I would look at it the opposite. I would say it's a recognition that the atheistic worldview, with all due respect, it's empty. It's incoherent, and it can't account for the reality that you and I live in. All the things that we accept as a given, they ultimately can't be real as immaterial things if the atheistic worldview is true.
Yeah, you were talking about the chemical reactions in the brain that creates the feelings of love. Those chemical reactions are no small matter. They're what allow us to go to the moon. They allow us to write literature, poetry, make beautiful art. That's what allows us to fall in love, to teach our children things. These chemical imbalances are, you kind of refer to them as the forward-moving sludge of the universe. But that forward-moving sludge is not some small matter. It's not forward-moving sludge. It's the human experience, which is actually, even without God, a very deep and meaningful human experience. It just isn't eternal. It doesn't last forever. And these comments about,
how do you know that, though?
Matters.
How do you know that they're not eternal?
I don't actually know that. That's what I believe. I could be wrong. So I don't think anybody can sit there and go, what happens in the afterlife? Everybody is just making stuff up as to what happens in the afterlife. Nobody actually knows.
I'm really glad you called. This has been an excellent conversation. I hope you'll call again and we can do it again in long form. But I would say in due time, I wouldn't be surprised if you become Catholic. And maybe we'll have a conversation down the road and you'll look back at this and say, yeah, things changed and God got to me. And that's my prayer, Dana. I really do pray that. I'm glad you called. I hope you call me again. Like what you just heard? Share it with your family and friends. And thanks for listening.